Hello and welcome back to the Metapod Podcast, the Pokemon TCG podcast that revolves around the evolving meta. It's March Madness, Sean. How's your bracket doing?
Non-existent, Jake.
Non-existent. You didn't do it. You didn't even do one
No,
at all. Like the mascots facing off each other, who would
no,
win?
no. My work had a couple of brackets, one for the men's and one for the women's tournament, but it's been busy. I have also been sick this last week,
Yeah.
so excuses. But it's not been at the forefront of my mind.
I mean, with working in college athletics, I haven't been able to really do one in years because
Mhm.
there's
You're legally not
what's the
allowed, right? No,
yeah, like I'm
are
not
are
really
you really?
allowed to actually, like
Interesting.
genuinely not
Okay,
really allowed to. But I am allowed to do it for fun and paste it on my wall. I don't know
that's
if you
right.
can see it on the video version of the podcast, but I got mine over here. It's not doing bad.
Did
St.
Gonzaga
John's
blow up your
losing.
bracket too?
No, I picked Gonzaga
Smart,
for
smart.
the I picked them to win the first round, but then I picked them to beat Houston in the second round, which Houston beat them, which kind of blew that up. But
Well, I will say
I'm
people bet. I heard word on the street is people bet against Gonzaga, and then somebody put out of the last like 18 seasons when
mhm.
Gonzaga was like the underdog or whatever, they've like won 15 out of 18 times, and it was like, why would you bet against Gonzaga in the first round? Like
Yeah,
statistically
like
speaking,
I mean, I'm not gonna sit here and say that I've watched a crazy amount of college basketball. I fill out this bracket in like 5 minutes. I just go off of feng shui and
yeah,
vibes,
vibes.
for the most part. But I know that Gonzaga historically has been a pretty good basketball team.
Yep.
So I was like, I believe them to at least win the first round. Now I had Clemson going to the Elite Eight and Wisconsin, and neither of those happened. So that hurt. But anyways, maybe in the future we'll do a March Madness thing of our own Pokemon cards. But for now, we've got plenty of stuff to talk about this
Yeah.
week. But Sean, do you just want to get right into it?
Well, I had one thing I wanted to shout out.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
There was a listener. They listen on the Spotify account. They commented. The person's name is Tenzin. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly, but I probably might not be. But I just wanted to shout them out. We used to do a lot of like reviews, 5-star reviews. We haven't done that in a hot minute here. Maybe we should bring it back. But this person wanted us to call them out because also they are not only listening concurrently with when these are coming out, but they're listening the full back catalog, Jake, all 5 years. And I'm like, that is, as they say, that is a Herculean task because we are
Yeah, we're on like
227
what is it?
episodes now.
I feel like we're farther than that too. I should know. I'm the
Mm,
one that labels
You're the
it
one
every
that makes the
single week.
thumbnails, but
Um,
we are quite far along. And also, it's just like watching a news program, I would imagine, or listening to like news because everything is very time sensitive. So it is weird. Like, Tenzin, let us know how bad are our takes? Like, in the long
how
run,
well?
how off are
Hey,
we?
hey, we got level ball right that one
We
time. We
did.
got level ball right that one time,
Maybe
and
Jake.
that is my shining moment. This is also episode 227, in
Yeah, I
case
was
you were
right.
wondering.
Nailed it.
Yeah,
But yeah, I was gonna say we might turn out to be the Jim Cramers of Pokemon
that means
card.
nothing to me. I have
Well,
no idea
so
what that is.
in the finance world, Jim Cramer constantly tells people to buy this stock or sell that stock, and people in the finance industry just say whatever he says, do the opposite of it because he's always wrong.
Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. I feel like I'm not that wrong
No, I don't think
most
we're
of the
that wrong,
time.
but it would be. I'm interested to know how off are we. Anyways, uh, we can get into the realness of this episode, Jake. And the first thing that I want to talk about is we don't usually talk about cards and future sets until the set review, but I feel like we got to talk a little bit about the first couple of cards that were revealed from the glory of Team Rocket. Um, and Jake, this is an interesting set. I want to get your take on it, right? Like, have you had a chance to read through them yet?
I have seen some of the cards posted, not every single one of these cards. It's been a busy work week, but I've seen a couple of them, and I think the set's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I feel like overall it's gonna be similar to Journey Together where nothing goes crazy, but there are cool things in the set.
Yeah, like, the main ones to talk about in terms of attackers, let's be frank, there's only one solid attacker that was announced so far, and that was the Team Rocket's Mewtwo EX, which a couple of things. It's a 280 HP basic Pokemon, Jake.
Mhm.
That's kind of wild. I think that is, if I were to go out on a limb, I would say that's probably what we're going to be looking at for the Mega Diancie three prizer as well, is
Okay.
somewhere in that range. That just feels right. Maybe they'll bump it
Mhm.
to 300, but like I feel like that will be the range that we're looking at.
A good ballpark.
But the interesting thing about this one is it is a Team Rockets Mewtwo. So I think this actually means that we're not going to have any Jesse and James cards. There's not going to be any specific trainer names on Team Rockets cards. They're just going to be called Team Rockets blank. But they
Yeah,
do
because
feature.
if you look at the reveals of them, the Mewtwo ZX has a Giovanni on it, right, in the little trainer corner, but there are other cards in there that have other notable, Team Rockets members from the series or, like, regular grunts on the cards. So but they're all labeled just Team Rockets.
Yeah. So, I think we can put to bed this idea that there's going to be like Jesse and James or Giovanni cards. It's all Team Rocket. Um, but the interesting thing with this one is it's got a 3 energy attack, and that 3 energy attack, it starts at 160, but then you max out your damage at 280. So, it's effectively one of these cards, which they do a lot, where it does a lot, but it also does the exact amount to knock out an opposing version of itself.
Yeah,
Um,
especially in Mewtwo, this is a historic thing. The was it black and white, late black and white era, the Mewtwo EX.
mm,
They call it the Mewtwo Wars. Just look up Pokemon trading card game Mewtwo Wars. There's a whole era about Mewtwo EX and Double Turbo Energy just constantly knocking each other out. But this is kind of in the same realm, the same vein.
So it is an interesting card. Like, I think 280 is fine for, it's
Hmm.
not really for 3 energy. It's 280 for 5 energy because you need to discard 2 energy from your bench Pokemon to get to the 280. So I I I think of it more like 280 for 5. It's just 2 of the 5 is somewhere else.
Yeah. Did you
Similar
mention
to
its ability?
its ability is it can't attack unless you have 4 or more Team Rockets Pokemon in play. Which right now, like I think it's fair. Like we do have lots of we have Area Zero. Um, you know, I think that you could certainly have like a full bench of things. But there's always going to be a Mewtwo and probably another Mewtwo plus 2 other Team Rockets Pokemon at
Hmm.
all times. The interesting thing that I'll actually be something I'll be interested to see in the future though is we oftentimes get things like stadiums, like Path to the Peak, and what came before that? Before Power Plant, like
Yeah.
stadiums that turn off abilities, particularly for rule box Pokemon. So we haven't had a Path to the Peak now for a little over a year or more. But I could imagine a world in which right before this rotates, they print for the final like 6 months or so of its lifespan another stadium that turns off abilities, thus allowing a Team Rockets Mewtwo deck to be played without a full Team Rockets package. So
Hmm.
I'm just pointing that out because like we've seen cards that have restrictions and then those restrictions kind of go away weirdly with like future card releases. So yeah, probably
I think
thinking
it's
too
a
far ahead.
pretty I think it's a cool card, and I think it could be like a cool idea, especially when you talk about Team Rocket's Spadops, right? I love this card. If you are longtime listeners of the podcast, you know that I loved Blacephalon Naganadel, right?
Yes, yes.
In the GX era, and this is kind of the next iteration in a sense. Team Rocket's Mewtwo and Team Rocket's Spadops. The Spadops is a stage 130 HP grass type Rockets type Pokemon, has the ability Charge Up. During your turn, you may attach a basic energy from your discard pile to this Pokemon. So it also just, I mean, it just says basic energy. So it can be any type of energy at all. And especially with, Team Rocket's Mewtwo EX needing 4 or more Team Rocket's Pokemon in play, Spadops is an incredible option. Get the energy accelerated on the bench to the Spadops and then discard them through Team Rocket's Mewtwo EX's attack to be able to do max amounts of damage. Really like this guy in here. This is honestly like one of the ones that I'm most excited for. 'Cause I just love it. Cause also it doesn't say like, it doesn't have any other restriction on it, so it's not like the Mewtwo where you have to have only Team Rocket's Pokemon in play,
Yeah.
right? This can be put in any deck that needs the energy, on the field. Can be like an energy switch deck, like, Ogre Pawn kinda deal, stuff like that, so this card is gonna be really, really cool in the meta, I hope.
Um, the last card I'll actually mention, there's other cards from this set, like other Pokemon. I think the trainers are particularly interesting, though. You've got an Ariana
Yes.
card that says that you can draw until you have 8 if all of your Pokemon are Team Rocket's Pokemon. Pretty decent there, just straight draw power.
Mhm.
You have Archer, which kind of acts as sort of a Marnie-ish effect. So it's like a Marnie slash Judge slash
I will say
Roxanne-ish kind of thing.
the I will say the best example is more like Ace Trainer from X and Y, Ancient
Okay.
Origins. Do you remember
No,
that
no.
card off the top of your head? So Ace Trainer is an old card from X and Y, absolutely broken. Actually, it was played in a lot of different decks. You can only play the Ace Trainer card if you have more prize cards left than your opponent. So, kind of in the same vein, in a sense, right? Because with Team Rocket's Archer, you can only use it if one of your Team Rocket's Pokemon were knocked out during your opponent's last turn. So, it's
Mhm.
not always going to be the same, but it's relatively the same. In Ace Trainer, each player shuffles their hand in their deck, draws 6 cards, and your opponent draws 3. This Team Rocket one is just 1 card less for the person that pull card, shuffles the hand into the deck, draws 5, your opponent draws 3. So it's really in the same vein as Ace Trainer, but nerfed a little bit because Ace Trainer was really, really good in the X and Y era. Like almost not almost like, toxic kind of good, so, kind of like how they made Versus Seeker from, like, the black and white X and Y era into Eldegoss V way
Mhm.
back when, a nerfed version. This is kind of that next iteration of that.
I want to mention with that card because I do think that this goes really well. I don't think Team Rocket's Persian is any good. It's a fun meme, but I don't think it's very good.
Yeah.
But I do think that that card specifically goes well with the Team Rocket's Meowth. The first attack on Meowth, you choose a random card from your opponent's hand, they shuffle it into their deck. So if you can archer them down to 3 early in the game, right? They've only taken 1 prize theoretically.
Maybe your
Um,
Budew,
right, right. Well, no, it has to be a Team Rockets Pokemon that they have to
Oh,
knock
yeah,
out.
that's right.
It's a
Okay,
very
yeah.
specific card, unfortunately. But let's say you play a package, maybe you play it with Unfair Stamp too, just in case you also run Badoo. But imagine doing that and then putting your opponent down to just 2 random cards that were shuffled into their hand, and then whatever they top deck, right? Like there are ways out of that, but I don't know. There's something there if you want a little early game control. But
You know what I think is better with the Team Rockets Archer,
mm,
Ace Trainer reprint? You
what's
know what
that?
I think is better, Sean?
What's that?
Team Rocket's Receiver.
I mean,
This card is
gross.
I was shocked when they revealed this card. This card, for anyone who has not seen it on any social media, or I don't even know if we've posted it in the Discord or anything like that, because, as you said, we usually don't talk about future sets too often until we get the set review time. But this item card, Team Rocket's Receiver, searches your deck for a supporter card with Rocket in its name. Reveal it, put it in your hand, shuffle your deck. It is literally a Team Rocket's Luminion V, right?
Yeah.
Just an item card that searches any Team Rocket supporter. And guess what? They printed a new iteration of an insane card like Ace Trainer. Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
I also will say I don't know how Team Rocket's receiver goes with things like with other formats like Eternal
Hmm.
because there's old cards that have Rocket in its name, right? Old
Yeah, we'll have to
supporters.
for
That'll be
I think
interesting.
there are.
Justin Basil, holler at us of like how,
How scared are you
yeah,
of the
is it
upcoming
that
ban
good,
list?
or is it
Yeah,
is it
because
one of
you
those where they're not technically labeled supporters, so like maybe they don't count. Who knows?
yeah, and also, there's a card, those of you may remember from the XY era, Team Rocket's Handiwork. Do you
Mm.
know that card, Sean?
No, no, what's it do?
I've used that in expanded decks, because I'm a degen, but Team Rocket's Handiwork, you flip 2 coins, and for each heads, you discard 2 cards from the top of your opponent's deck.
I mean, I'm
And
just saying this card's probably gonna go ham in other formats, especially
does
too.
it specifically look for with
Supporter.
Rocket in its name?
Yep.
So it's Rockets in its name. So you can use Team Rocket's Evil Deeds from Neo Destiny. You can use Rocket's Sneak Attack from the original Team Rocket set. Ooh, this is really cool.
Wasn't
This
there a
is
supporter called
interesting.
like Here Comes Team Rocket in like the WotC era?
I believe so. The only one that I can think of is Rocket's Admin, which is
Okay.
basically the first iteration of N.
Okay.
uh, from way back when. That was in like the Celebrations. It came in Team Rocket's Return originally, and it was reprinted in Celebrations as one of like the anniversary cards. But
So, anyways, if you
I,
play any of
I,
those weird formats, I think you're eating good with Rockets receiver.
the it's gonna be. It's funny. I would love an update. Oh yeah, here comes Team Rocket as part of XY Evolutions, and reprinted through Celebrations. Yeah.
Well, anyways, there's a couple other really good cards. We have Team Rocket's Giovanni, which is basically Guzma, except you have
Hmm.
to switch a Team Rocket in your active with a Team Rocket on your bench. Um, so it only works for you switching between Team Rocket's Pokemon, so it's very limited in its use cases. But it's a really cool card if you're playing the deck. It's better than Boss.
Yeah, it's a Guzma.
Right. It's a
Like,
Guzma. Like, oh, I feel like if with this deck, this is like one of the few decks that I think Control would absolutely struggle to do anything about. Because you run 2 or 3 copies of this in the deck, and those are switch cards and Gust cards all in one.
and by the way, you have that item card that I just talked about
Yeah,
that searches for it, so
exactly.
you really, like,
It's
you have
crazy.
so many outs. Yeah. Wow.
And then probably one of the biggest things for all of this is we do have a new special energy in Team Rocket's Energy. It provides 2 energy in any combination of Psychic and or Dark, which is crazy. It can only be attached to a Team Rockets Pokemon. So
Mhm,
if it gets attached to anything that doesn't have Team Rockets in its name, it doesn't provide just colorless. It actually gets discarded. So
mhm.
I think that that's an effect that we rarely see. Usually it's like if it doesn't meet the requirement, it for whatever
It's a
reason
colorless
it's just
energy.
colorless, right? But another thing to keep in mind with this is it mentions dark energy. We don't have any dark attackers in this reveal. So I fully expect there to be some sort of Weezing and or an Arbok. Who maybe there's something else in
Okay.
there as well. But I mean, those are the classic Jesse James Pokemon too, and those are
Yeah, and I
usually
mean,
dark.
they have been dark. I believe they've been dark type cards in the trading card game. We had, Arbok. Was it Arbok EX?
Yep,
Or
Arbok
something
was
like that?
dark.
There was a
Weezing has been
yeah.
recently. They've been dark. They were
And
psychic
in
in the
Pokemon
past.
Pocket, they've been
Yeah.
dark, actually. Yeah.
So, anyways, that's like a very long-winded update on some new cards that were revealed, but
Much longer than we intended.
yeah, but they're very exciting. I think that when all is said and done, I do think that the Team Rockets archetype will be by far the most powerful of all the trainers archetypes that we're getting.
Mm,
From what I've seen, like
yeah.
I
It
don't
all
see how the
depends
others
on what
compare.
it all depends on the rest of the set, I think, because I think as it stands alone, it's still super early. I don't think it's at that level, but I think if there's just like 1 or 2 more support items or whatever, or maybe a support Pokemon that works really well, could be really interesting.
But Jake, we joked last week about all the Black Hoodie crew and people need to get on their game for the scalpers, and we got some new accessories here that if you're into that scalping lifestyle, you can rock. That's coming out in the Pokemon Center in Japan. It's going to be just showing a few of the items. We won't spend too much time on this, but you got sleeves, a deck box, some Some other fancier deck boxes, like a leather deck box with an R on it, which, I might try to snag me one of those at some point.
Mhm.
Um, there's a playmat, but I actually find the R playmat to be a little, I don't know. I don't know. It's not my cup of tea. I get it.
Here's the
It's
thing,
vibes, but
for all the audio only listeners that are like, "What the heck are they talking about right now?" 90% of these things are a single design where it is just a black back or a black, background color and a red R.
yeah.
And that's it. Like, that's the thing. So, yeah, the playmat that Sean's talking about is just a black playmat with red trim and a red R slapped in the middle of it with the Pokemon trading card game logo in the corner,
So,
which actually works well with Rocket, I feel
it
like.
does.
It's not a bad design, it's very simple, it's not the cut and paste of,
Ultra Pro.
Ultra Pro's playmats that I hate.
Yeah. But then they're also doing a like fancy briefcase style thing, carrying case.
Mhm.
Um, and that will be available through a lottery. Net, like, if you're not from Japan, if you're not in Japan, your odds are you're going to be getting any of this from like a secondhand sort of seller. So my gut would say, unless you like really want the whole set, just pick and choose whatever of these things that you're vibing with.
Mhm.
But yeah, it'll be interesting to see who rocks up to NAIC with a Team Rockets deck box.
I will say they have, another design for, a couple things, sleeves in a deck box where it's, the Team Rocket logo, but also, like, Giovanni and some other
Hmm.
trainers and some other notable Pokemon, red and black mainly, for sleeves in a regular, is this acrylic? What kinda deck box is this?
It's
I
like a
don't even know
plastic
what the
deck box, like
material is.
a thin. I don't know
Yeah,
the
like,
material type, but yeah.
if you've been to, like, NAIC or whatever this material is for the single deck boxes and whatnot, but, yeah, some cool stuff coming through Rocket that a lot of people are excited about.
Moving on, we do wanted to touch briefly because neither Jake nor I are really deep into the TCG Pocket world anymore. But there is another set that got revealed, Shining Revelry. It is, as the name implies, a shiny set. So all of the mobile only users will get to know the wonder and insanity that is a shiny set release.
Yeah.
Um, and I think, as always, just really gorgeous cards. Like no surprise there.
Mhm.
But Jake, I know going into this week, you wanted to briefly touch on like how maybe some people are feeling about TCG Pocket's release schedule. Do you want to dive deeper in on that?
So there is a huge sentiment. Well, first, Pokemon TCG Pocket has been doing great stuff. We don't talk about it as much anymore, but like ranked matches are soon going to be coming in Pokemon TCG Pocket. I know there's several creators, like on my timeline and stuff, that are TCG Pocket focused, and their channels have been doing incredible, right? Great stuff. There's a huge audience for it. A lot of people playing it, but there's a huge sentiment now because of the release schedule that sets are coming out too fast. The Shining Revelry set is coming out on March 27th. So at the time of this recording, it's only 4 days, and it's only 2 days when the episode releases. And it feels like less than a month ago, we just had whatever the Arceus set
Mm-hmm.
is. And so, especially because for the people that play for free, right? You do not open that many packs. You barely can master set. It's incredibly long to craft. Like I mean, I just actually um took it down, but I don't have the premium version anymore. But I've
Mm-hmm.
been using the premium version where you get like the extra 2 boosters a day or whatever. Um, and I still can't master set things, and I open the max amount of packs that you can without paying more money, and, I'm burnt out. Like, I'm just gonna do it if I can't complete the sets anyways and get enough credits to be able to craft the rest of the cards, then I'm just gonna not pay for it and just open what I open, and then that's it. And a lot of it too has to do with me hating the battle system and not wanting to do that, but I think there's a lot of people that I've seen with the reveal of this, of like Pokemon Pocket is releasing sets way too fast. And I've seen some people also kind of talk about and discuss like, well, this is a very similar release schedule to sets coming out in Japan, right? IRL sets coming out in Japan because
Sure.
like, but the difference is that, you
Smaller.
just buy the cards and then you have
And they're
them.
also they're much smaller sets in Japan than
Yeah.
the pocket. Like some of the pocket sets have been like 200 cards. No set
Yeah.
in
It's
Japanese is 200
it's not a
cards.
it's not a like exact one to one for sure.
No.
But I think it's interesting to like think about, is it actually like going too much? I would love to know like the play rates of the people who have continued through time and how it is maybe dropped off, right? Because I think it's guaranteed that there has been a drop off since set one released, right? That's only natural games releasing, but also of just like, especially those people that continue staying, who's paying money? How much money are they paying to be able to have master sets, to be able to have two of, each of at least minimum rarity cards in order to play them in decks, grinding out those ranked matches. It's a really interesting thought. And I think this is the first time that I've heard people really just groan about a new pocket set. The memes of people not having enough dust or whatever hourglasses are crazy.
I mean, the fact that they don't transfer between sets as well
Yes.
is really, I think, difficult because you basically have to commit like, oh, if I want to finish the original, the very first set, right? Then I need to open up some packs because if you play, you want to get some of the new stuff. But once you sort of get that baseline, you just go back and you feel like, well, I want to finish that. So I got to keep opening the original set. Meanwhile, it just feels like effectively your backlog is just growing and growing and growing. And you just feel like I can never catch up. It's impossible unless I spend
Mhm.
$500 a day or, whatever the max amount you can spend. Which is, not, I mean, like, I don't know what their goal is. Maybe they want people to get burnt out a little bit so that they don't try to get master sets. Maybe genuinely their goal is,
That's a crazy goal, I
I
feel
mean, but
like.
like think about it, right? Like if you can never complete it, then
Mhm.
you have a player base that will never be finished. So then the game can just go forever and no
Oh, I
one,
guess, yeah, yeah.
I mean, like, think about it. Like if you were to like complete everything you needed to do in the game in 2 or 3 weeks every time the set came out, then you might have huge swaths of people just not playing. You'd be like, I'll just wait till the next set. At least with this way, nobody can complete it. It's impossible. So I don't know. I'm not saying that's a good or a bad thing, but I'm like,
I
I,
think that's actually a pretty good point because when the second set released on Pocket, the Celebi set,
yeah,
um, I was able to get a card in every single card in there. I was able to do that, but then I had to backlog to Genetic Apex, and I will say that I was definitely not as uh what's the word that I'm looking for? I was not as oh man. Um
invested,
Is
hype.
yeah,
Uh,
like, I guess invested of, like, trying to make sure that I open packs right away, as
you
soon as
didn't
I
have
had
that
4 packs
FOMO.
ready to open. Yeah, like, I was just backlogging to backlog, and so I think that's an interesting point of, like, I would love to see the numbers on, when people complete the master set of the latest set, how do they just drop off and they wait until the new set, or do they go back and complete, or if they've already or if they've completed every single one, when they complete the new one, do they then drop off in general and just wait for the, next one? Because theoretically, no, because 'cause you're always collecting hourglasses, right, in the game?
I mean, you're always collecting hourglasses, but if you have nothing that you need to open, like in theory, like if you had every single card,
Yeah.
including all the promos, doesn't matter what pack you open, then you're kind of like, well, I'm not going to stress myself about making sure I log on twice a day to redeem my hourglasses, right? Like, what
Yeah,
does it
that
matter?
makes
They'll
sense.
they'll let them just sit at max for whenever the next set opens, and then because I can't do anything with the bulk, right? I can't do anything with the dust at that point. I have every card, so
Yeah. I will say it's pretty typical to the gotcha experience if you've ever played gotcha games. You eventually get overwhelmed and you miss out, and then it feels really bad. And some people stick it out, some people don't.
But last little piece of news before we get into actual deck lists, new stuff is in the letter to a community that the TCG Live put out. They announced that they were going to be having something called trainer trials, which is a
Hmm.
rotating alternate format style. Um, and then they gave us like a 9 week sort of runway of like, here's what you can expect for the next 9 weeks of us, like what formats are going to be in TCG Live each week. And some of them are, some of them are really weird, kind of interesting, like Twin Battle, each card appearing exactly twice. So it's not a minimum of two or a maximum, it's exact.
Yeah.
They have Singleton in standard, which is kind of weird. But the one that I think stood out, and I think that, a lot of people are pretty excited for, is that Gym Leader Challenge will be making a premiere on TCG Live for 2 weeks, Jake.
An official debut of
Yeah.
Gym Leader Challenge, which I think are really cool because in the Gym Leader Challenge, right, description that they have, first of all, it's going to be running for 2 weeks. Most of all of these categories are in 2 week periods, only one of them, the final one, being a 1 week period, but going to be running for 2 weeks. And they also follow the same like rule set as the GLC that you probably know, love, and play or have heard about through, Andrew Mahone and Tricky Jim, like really popularizing the format when COVID was going on. Even to say, A specs are not allowed, rule box Pokemon not allowed, every Pokemon is a single energy type. One copy of each card is allowed except for the basic energy and the ban list as well. The ban list is the same that they have in Tricky Jim's GLC format. So really, really cool to see. The only difference is that they say in the card pool, cards from Black and White series onwards, which is an official GLC, like, or I guess is the original rules, right, of GLC. They just don't have like the Black and White X and Y cards in
In live.
or they don't have black and white. They have X and Y, right? Or
I
no,
don't
is
know.
it just the start of Sword and Shield? They're
Uh,
missing some of the cards
yeah,
in
they don't
PTCG
have
Live.
everything.
Yeah, they're missing some of it in there, so it'll technically be like a unique format in Gym Leader Challenge, but the fact that it is running is gonna be really, really cool, and I'm really, really excited because, in my mind, they've had these as official side events at regionals and stuff, and they've been popular. I've played in literally like a 300-person GLC pod side event, at, like, NAIC. So it's really, really nice that this is also coming to a major platform. I say major with almost quotations, I feel like, but a major platform in Pokemon TCG Live, and it's going to be on Pokemon TCG Live if you want to schedule it, because the more people that play it, the more likely that they'll do more stuff with it. And I know there are some people, myself included, that are passionate about GLC. I love playing GLC.
Yep.
Um, it is gonna be on PTCG Live from April 24th, 17 UTC to May 8th, 17 UTC. So write that down in your calendars and stuff like that.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see what fun new bugs TCG
Yeah,
Live
that's gonna be
experiences with a
there's gonna
strange
be a
format like
whole
that.
there's gonna be a whole slew of bugs because, there's gonna be cards that have probably been bugged for years now in live, but those cards have never seen play in standard,
Yeah.
so nobody's ever found out that they're bugged. Probably going to be at this point.
But Jake, now getting into it, we are going to look at a few deck lists. I have three sort of lists pulled up. I have the Champions League Fukuoka also pulled up to give us some results and lists. And then as well, just some lists that Justin Basil put together on his site. So
Mhm.
jumping straight into it, though, I know that a lot of people are very excited about N Zoroark as a deck. So I wanted us to just take a look at the N Zoroark deck list. Like, what might a deck list look like? This was, I believe, let me see real quick. Let me go back. It's a deck list that was the 14th place deck list from Fukuoka,
Mhm.
for reference. So definitely didn't like win the tournament or anything, but still 14th place, pretty good.
Yeah, respectable.
And like we were saying in our set review, you really have a main attacker in the Ends Darmanitan. The ability to like do 90 and then 90 to the bench, pretty
Or, well,
strong.
Zoroark copying
Exactly.
Darmanitan.
Yeah, yeah. That's
Yeah.
fair. Zorak copying Darmanitan's attack. Although in theory, with the reversal energy, you could attack with Darmanitan directly.
Oh, yeah, for
So
sure,
like,
as a single prize, like, option.
yeah. So it's cool. Like you have a little bit of optionality there. But then the other two attackers, I would argue, you do have Badu. So if you didn't like Badu now, buckle up. Uh,
Buckle up, it's still here.
and then one copy of the Ends Reshiram, which I think makes perfect sense, right? Like you do have cards like Night Stretcher, where if you want to hit with that Ends Reshiram a second time, maybe like maybe your opponent snipes it on the bench to get rid of it, so you don't have access to the attack. You don't need to evolve it, so it's very Night Stretcherable. Um, and then interestingly, though, you say, okay, well, what might you put in an Ends package that isn't an Ends card? And the answer is Peturant and Pheasantipity, obviously.
Pheasantipity surprise.
Yeah, Pheasantipity is just amazing. Crazy,
Mhm.
huh? Um, but I think the cool thing about this and what we're actually seeing, Jake, do you see the sort of combo potential of Peturant and Enzorark with Binding Mochi?
Yeah, anytime that you have a dark type main attacker like Ends Zorark, Petra EX works really, really well in this combo that you're talking about with Binding Mochi, because with say that 5 times fast, subjugating chains on Petron EX, you move a dark type benched Pokemon into the active. So if you happen to start the Reshiram, right, which is a 2 energy retreat cost, or have the Darumaka or Darmanitan up in the active 2 or 3 retreat costs, instead of spending energy or maybe having to fit in switch cards in your deck, right? All you have to do is the Petrarund EX, and with the Binding Mochi as well, doing 40 extra damage with your Enzorark. If you're copying the Ensdar Manitan attack, right? That's 130 to the active,
Yeah.
90 to the bench. If you're copying the Ends Reshiram, right, you can copy the Innocent Flame for 210 damage, or even that powerful range if it has damage counters already on it from something like a Dragapult, 6 pings or something like that. You can do a ton of damage with the powerful Rage or Outrage attack on there. And there's a lot of really, really cool combos that you can do inside of that.
Yeah, I would say in general, this deck, it's really interesting. I Pokemon League headquarters is also another stadium in this deck that requires basic attackers to use 1 extra energy, which is, can be really annoying for certain archetypes. But the thing I'll be interested to see with this deck, playing against it, is how does a deck like this really fare against, um, slightly beefier non-evolutions, right?
Mhm.
Because you think about this and you're like, okay, doing 90 and 90 really strong if you are hitting things that need to evolve. Doing 170 similarly, like really strong, either if you need to hit something or knock out something that hasn't evolved yet, or maybe a Squawkabilly, who knows. But you get into awkward territory when you're trying to hit into things like Miraidons or Iron Hands or Raging Bolts, where the numbers are just funky. You know what I mean? Like they, maybe they can't knock you out, but it can be pretty awkward because like you might want to one shot them, but like nothing at your disposal is gonna get you there, gonna get you to 220 or above.
Mhm.
So I will be very interested to see sort of how that plays out.
It's definitely a setup type deck, right? I mean, even playing stuff like Counter Catcher and Unfair Stamp, right? It's not unheard of to be down by prizes, but then take a lot of prizes very quickly after doing a lot of setup plays and things like that. And to be honest, like, as much as I love Enzorark and as much as I'm gonna play it, personally, because I love me a trash one, draw two type of ability. It's never going to be the best deck, especially with the trainers Pokemon reveals that we've had,
Yeah.
unfortunately. So, but it's still going to be a good deck. It's still going to be a viable deck, but I don't even know if it'll scrape like the top five decks of the format. If anything, it's going to be five out of that top five list. So,
Yeah.
definitely a viable one, but if you're looking for the best deck in format, right, to build, and maybe you don't want to spend money on a brand new playset of EXs, you're not going to miss too much with
No.
missing and Zoroark.
The other one, another deck list though, this was the ninth place deck at the City League in Tokyo. This is way back in January. But I just wanted to give people a look at like what a Iono's deck could look like. So I'm pulling up the Iono's Belly Bolt deck. Um, and I don't think it's a huge surprise that like the main attacker in an Iono's Belly Bolt deck is probably like the best option in the format right now might just be Raging Bolt.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, it's a
fair.
and I will say with Raging Bolt, like it makes a lot of sense to fit it inside an Iono's package, right? Iono's package is all about electric type Pokemon, and with Raging Bolt, that bellowing thunder attack, lightning, and also fighting. So Professor Sada's Vitality, just an excellent card. The Belly Bolt EX, right? Having that ability to attach basic lightning energy from your hand to one of your Iono's Pokemon, which is great
Mhm.
for that belly bolt right there. And with the Kilowattrel as well, being able to discard a basic energy and draw cards, you can synergize that really, really well with Superior Energy Retrieval, Night Stretcher, different recovery cards in your deck to be able to constantly draw and draw and draw within this. So definitely a cool one. There's a couple different ways I feel like with Iono, but definitely Raging Bolt, I think, is probably one of the better options and one that people could probably get to first.
Yeah, yeah. So, look, I don't know if this is like a top tier deck long term,
No,
because it's
I don't think
no,
any
no,
of the
no,
trainers decks are top tier.
no. Yeah, but I will say if you're looking to play the Ionos package, Raging Bolt's a good option. I don't necessarily have a list, but I do think that there are versions that you could run Maridon because you know places that a deck like this might struggle is like obviously anytime you have a stage one heavy deck, it's setup. And Maridon just sort of fixes your setup immediately. So, but yeah, I just wanted to showcase this pretty neat deck here.
I'm kind of
Um,
surprised this doesn't play generators.
yeah, you could imagine like, hey, why not throw some generators in? I guess the thought process there is you're drawing so much. Like, I
Yeah.
will say, if you're annoyed with how many cards Raging Bolt Ogre Pawn draws, I don't think you're going to enjoy watching a Belly Bolt deck because between Kilowattrel abilities, Sada's Vitality, and Research in the deck, like
Squawkabilly, turn
Squawkabilly, like
one.
you're just going to be sitting here like, do I get a turn? Is this Yu-Gi-Oh? What's happening?
Yeah.
So, if you like drawing cards, this is a great deck for you. Um, but the last of the sort of this one, I don't know where. Like this was somebody who made the list. It's not from like a tournament, but just pulling up here a version of the hops decks, but specifically one that is not playing a metal package because you could theoretically play Hop Zacian with Archaladon in a metal package, but I think what we have seen the most success for is actually a largely like colorless based attacker route. So you are primarily going to be using the Zacian for its first attack of 30 and 30, or Cramorant or Snorlax, and then maybe some backup attackers like Blood Moon or Saluna, and then things like Monkey Dory to sort of spread any damage that maybe gets placed on your Pokemon throughout the game to sort of snipe your way into a variety of your prizes. So, Jake, I don't know. Does this speak to you at all?
Yeah, I mean, I think in general, Monkey Dory in the next format, I think is really, really good, right? There we'll see a lot of decks play around with Monkey Dory, especially when you have a couple of these different spread attacks, right? I even though I don't think it was in the end Zorark list, like, I think you could put a Monkey Dory in there, right? You're running Dark Energy and you have an
That's
attack that
true.
does 90/90. Think about if you can spread that, damage a little bit to be able to set up some numbers, and with the Hop Zacian, right, doing 30/30 as base, that's 30 on the bench that you can move with Monkey Dory, right? Monkey Dory moving, 3 damage counters.
Yeah.
Um on your Pokemon onto another person's Pokemon. So like there's a lot of cool stuff I feel like with this and that you'll see. I don't know how consistent it is. I mean, it plays Arvin, so it can't be that bad.
I mean, yeah, we we love a good Arvin deck. You have I think consistency wise, this will probably be the most consistent of all of the trainer decks off the bat because you do have things like Hop's Bag and the Hop's Choice Belt available to you,
Mhm.
which is going to meet your damage and your energy requirements and your finding your Pokemon requirements. So I'm surprised not to see several other things. I think Hop's Double is also like a pretty useful card because it's a gust on an evolution. Now,
It's all
yeah,
right.
I mean, like there
It doesn't
certainly
have
will
any
be.
value like outside of that. That's the
No,
problem.
that's true. That's true. It doesn't have a lot of value outside of that. So, but I do think somebody will find ways to make the hops deck better. I think, do you maybe run it alongside a Terapagos package and Glass Trumpet so that you can fill your bench and you can play the Knocked Owl line as well? Like, I think if you want to run Hop Zacian as a colorless package, I think there's a lot of territory to explore. And I think in
Mhm.
particular, colorless Pokemon right now are probably some of the most consistent Pokemon that you can build a deck around. Between Noctowl and Dubwool, some of the Hop stuff like Hop's Bag and the
Yeah.
Choice Belt, like I think there's some really interesting space there if somebody can find the right sort of combination of cards.
I think what's cheeky in this list is Morty's Conviction, which I
Okay.
feel like you can start seeing a lot more in the format. It definitely won't be like a playset in any deck, but being able to, for trashing one card, drawing for each of your opponent's benched Pokemon, especially with Area Zero under depths in format, like think about discarding one and drawing like eight.
Yeah, it's
That's pretty
crazy.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah, and even discarding 1 and drawing 5 in itself is still pretty good, right? If it's not an Area Zero deck, and we talk about time and time again how benches are filling in these last couple years, where if you have a full bench, you're doing pretty good, and I
Yep.
don't think that's changing anytime soon.
So Jake, moving away from some of the big archetype decks, like what actually is doing well? Looking at the Champions League Fukuoka here, what is that top tier deck? I know people think might be a meme, but like number
The
one sitting
top
on top.
The number 1 deck is Feraligatr. So Feraligatr, if you do not know, from Temporal Forces, has an ability called Torrential Heart. Once during your turn, you put 5 damage counters on the Pokemon. If you do, attacks used by this Pokemon do 120 damage to your opponent's active Pokemon. And you may think, okay, giant wave on this Feraligatr. You're going to do 280 damage, but this deck, for anyone who has not played it, is a very control wall style deck, right? Something that you're going to see a ton of in the format is Melodic EX. Melodic EX from Surging Sparks. If you don't have a playset already, go ahead and get them. Has an ability that prevents all damage from and effects of attacks from your opponent's Terra Pokemon
Yep.
done to this Pokemon. So especially as we move away from like V stars.
Yeah.
Hmm?
I know. I fully agree. Like the melodic deck, and I think I saw maybe Azul posted something like this where he was saying that wall decks in general are going to be very strong in the upcoming
Yes.
format.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at a lot of the top decks from Fukuoka, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 decks in the top 8 are playing Melodic EX. There's another one down there. And some decks just play a Melodic EX because you know what? It works. It's a good option. So I totally agree with Azul on there, and I think it's a really good evaluation and something that if you listen to a lot of people talking about the upcoming format, the upcoming rotation, stuff like that, everybody says you got to be able to deal with walls like Melodic EX, like Mimikyu, right? That
Yeah.
safeguard Mimikyu that we had a while. So the idea of the Feraligatr deck, at least, is to put the damage counters on the Feraligatr, use the Relicanth with Memory Dive to copy the effect of Croconaw reverse thrust for 30 damage, switch into one of your bench on. You switch yourself into like a melodic or Mimikyu, right? And you're able to do 150 damage on a hit and run type of deal. Playing a couple different switch cards like Rescue Board, right? Rescue Board working really well with the Safeguard Mimikyu. Um, and just really, really nice, I think, overall, with that. And guess what? Monkey Dory, because you're putting 5 damage counters on yourself, you can use Monkey Dory to move those damage counters off on your
Yeah.
180 HP for Alligator. So this is a tricky deck to learn as well. I feel like if you want to pick up this deck, it's really cheap and it's pretty easy to build, especially right now. But it takes a lot of practice to be able to play this deck efficiently, and that's why you only see one in the top 16 decks of Fukuoka.
Yep. But I mean, outside of that, we do see Dragapult Goldengo sitting at number 2. Kind of weird
Mhm.
combination, but like, you know, like you were saying with Melodic, actually, Dragapult is a Terra type. So if you're staring down the barrel of a Melodic, you need to have a way to answer that. And Goldengo, not a Terra type, can definitely answer that. Um, and then, you're thinking about like, well, what do I do if there's a Mimikyu out? Well, if there's a Mimikyu out, you use a combination of Monkey Dory plus Dragapult's uh, Phantom Dive damage kind of placement. That's how you deal with that, right? So
Mhm.
it's nice, like seeing like a deck like Dragapult say, hey, well, I'm going to play a different lineup to sort of both draw me cards, but also have an answer to these wall decks out there.
And I will say, I think I talked about this deck like 2 weeks ago because at the local that I was at,
Mm-hmm.
somebody played basically a pre-rotation, pre-journey together version of this list. Incredible game. Shout outs to you, my friend. It was so fun to play. This is basically a Goldango deck,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's a mainly a Goldango deck where Dragapult is just the other option in there because you play so many different counts of energy and sometimes Dragapult just sweeps you games.
Yeah.
Because if you do not know, looking at the deck list, maybe you're an audio only listener. This is a 4/4 line of Gimme Ghoul Goldango and then a 2/2/2 of the Dragapult line. And you're playing a bunch of great cards, very typical to the Goldango deck of Energy Search Pro, right? You have superior energy retrieval in there as well.
Yep.
But you have other options that are typical to Dragapult stuff if you need to go that route, or maybe if you just need something like Crispin, right? Because Crispin
Yep.
can actually work really well with a Goldango deck if you
Yeah.
have all the draw that you need, because you can attach one of the energies, the metal energy, and well, grab any other energy that you may need to knock something out. So very, very cool deck. I think that this will have spurts, especially in the format, because we've already seen spurts of Gold Dango. So with Dragapult being an option that the deck can go to, and it's a pretty effective pivot. Like when I played against the person at locals deck, they really pivoted and didn't use Dragapult at all because in the matchup, they wanted to use Goldango and needed to use Goldango instead of the Dragapult. But in previous games that they played, they just went a pure Dragapult route with maybe using Goldango to draw cards. So it's a really interesting like mashup
Yeah.
combination in a sense.
Outside of those two decks, which are 1 and 2, I think the next one I want to talk about actually is a melodic Farigiraf deck. So
For
I think,
Rigoraph.
oh, okay, yeah. I think for this one, it's interesting because I don't know if people like we mentioned melodic having the wall effect, stopping Terra attacks, but it also has an attack that does 160 and put the opponent's active to sleep, which can be very annoying.
And
Um,
especially as you're a wall deck, right? Getting hit 160 is not uh great, I will say for you.
yeah. But then also the Farigiraf or Farigiraf,
Mhm.
has a similar wall effect of preventing all damage done by your opponent's basic EX. So if you're up against, I'm not
Raging
sure
Bolt,
exactly. Raging Bolt, yeah,
Raging
Raging
Bolt.
Bolt's a great example. Then you lead with the giraffe Pokemon. I'll just stop it there. Which also does 160 and 30 to a bench. But I mean, point here is it is a wall centric deck. And look, push comes to shove, you have Cornerstone Mask Ogerpon as well, which maybe you're playing against Goldengo, and you're like, well, it's not a Terra and it's not a basic. Cornerstone Mask, you're up, buddy.
Yeah, just Pokemon that stop abilities. The big thing about this deck is now, with the popularization of these different options that we have in the format as other decks, a wall deck can be really, really good because, like you're saying, there's a wall for pretty much every single effect, right? Whether it's the
Yeah.
melodic, whether it's the Farigarath, whether it's the Ogre Pawn, right? And you have other options in here like Monkey Dory, right? Monkey Dory, if you try to just put little damage counters on there, Monkey Dory will move them. There's Pokey Vital A. Sean, do
Yeah.
you remember what that card does without looking at it?
My guess is it's a I feel like it's a card that, like, if this Pokemon were to be knocked out by your opponent's attack, you like heal it or something. I don't know. It feels like a heal card,
But
but let me
it
read it
is a
out.
heal card. Pokevital A is one of the few A specs that says this card can't be put into your hand or deck from the discard pile. So essentially,
Okay.
when you use it, you lose it kind of sense. Heal 150 damage from one of your Pokemon. That's it. Just
Spare.
heal 150. Yeah, and a lot of times 150 can be huge, right? All of these Pokemon having over 200 HP, these walls that you have in the 270 melodic, the 260 for Rigoraph, the 210 Ogerpon, right, can tank a hit and you can heal a lot of it off. So, very, very interesting in my opinion. Also, running stuff like Technical Machine Turbo Energize and Technical Machine Evolution. So, obviously, you're running a 4 Arven build off of that, right? To either evolve into your wall or put energy on your wall to be
Yeah.
able to apply pressure. Because you mentioned the 160 on Melodic, the Farigaraph's Dirty Beam does 160/30
Yep.
to an opponent, and then also the Cornerstone Mask Ogerpon has a 140 damage shred attack,
Mm.
essentially, getting through all, effects on an opponent's Pokemon not affected by weakness or resistance, so, actually, you can in the mirror match, this card is pretty good, I think.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that might also be part of it, right? Like, if this is a strong deck, you kind of need your own Cornerstone Mask, and then I think it just comes down to like your Monkey Dory plays, when you choose to heal, etc. That's at that
Yeah.
point, that's I think what it comes down to. But
It's probably about who uses
mm,
something like Pokevital a second,
yeah,
right, instead of first, in the mirror match. So this deck is you're gonna see this deck a lot, especially at locals, and you're probably gonna hate it, but it is a deck that is going to exist, and eventually, probably like most other formats, the format will build around to have answers and responses to it.
yeah. Um, Outside of that, though, if there's one more deck from this Fukuoka that you would want to talk about, what deck to round us out for the day?
I feel like a lot of people, especially, if you've been playing the game for a bit now, it's not going to be your first tournament coming up soon, or maybe you've been playing for the last year on Pokemon TCG Live or something. Charizard EX, I think, is really interesting if you want to pull up that list
Yeah.
because I think a general trend that we're seeing in the format is Charizard moving away from Pidgeot EX.
Hmm.
So moving into more of the Noctowl line, right? And you have a couple different options in here, especially like there's a couple Terrapagos in the list for that unified beatdown type of attack because the Charizard EX's Infernal Rain can accelerate those basic fire energies to any Pokemon
Yep.
on the field. So you've got options in different attackers, whether that's Charizard or Terrapagos, and both are pretty good, right? You have plenty of options, especially if you have both Charizard or Terapagos in play to utilize Noctowl and use different key things like Briar, the Terra Orb card, right? And plenty of other options like Maximum Belt as usually the ace spec of choice. So I think
I
that's really, really cool because for the time we've seen Charizard fall off and been the partner to Pidgeot
mhm.
EX, but now it's kind of moving away from Pidgeot in general.
I will say, huge shout out. I have a friend here who just got into the game like 2 months ago, maybe. Andrew, if you're listening, he built a Charizard deck about a month and a half ago. And as he's new, he's like, I don't really have all the cards. So I just want to build something fun. It's like, what should I build? So he built Charizard Noctowl, having never seen any of these lists. And as I was playing against him and I played his deck. We played against it. We were like building things. And I'm like, yo, this deck is fun. This deck is way more consistent than Charizard Pidgeot, to be frank. And running
Mhm.
it with the Terapagos, I can't remember if he has the Dusknoir line in there, but like a lot of the other stuff, and now that I'm seeing it in these lists, I'm just like, Andrew was just on it. It just intuited for him. Like, why wouldn't I? It's a Terra. Noctowl's good. Let's make this
Noctowl's
work.
great with Terra Pokemon, you know?
So having played against it inadvertently, seeing the future of the format, I can attest to how strong the deck is when you get your setup, right? If you find your Fan Rotom and you find a Charmander and a Terapagos early,
Mhm.
and your opponent doesn't Iono you. I will say every time that I've beaten him, because we played and I always beat him, unfortunately, he'll get there one day, but it's always because I Iono him immediately after he Fan Rotons some Noctowls into his hand. So if you want some advice of how to beat this deck if you play against it, prioritize finding Iono turn one going second.
Yeah, that's gonna be a huge
Savage.
key, and you might need that key if you face a can if we could go over one more deck, because I just remembered that this deck is also going to be a big thing.
Yeah.
I think that really appeared in the Fukuoka Championships. The Ogre Pond Noctowl deck that popped
Terrabox.
up, Terra Box, you may have seen and heard about Tord Reckliffe going to the Fukuoka Championships in Japan and playing this deck, being a part of the group that made this. This is a really interesting kind of like counter box style deck. You've got the Teal Mask Ogre Pawn, right, that accelerates energies. You've got Wellspring Overpawn as well. Wellspring Overpawn has that Sob attack to be able to make sure the defending Pokemon can retreat because nobody's playing switch cards in this format, right? As well as a spread attack in that torrential pump. But you've got plenty of other attacking options as you play 5 different types of basic energies and a sparkling crystal on top of that, especially with Pikachu EX, right? Pikachu EX
Yeah.
with that Resolute Heart ability, right? Basically, as a focus sash, if it gets knocked down at full HP, put it to 10. You've got Lily's Clefairy EX being able to be the Dragapult counter or just dragging counter in general, making it 2 times weak to psychic attacks and being able to attack with either genome hacking Mew or the Lily's Clefairy EX, you're going to be able to do damage on those dragon Pokemon there. And so basically, that's exactly what this is. You use your different Terra Pokemon in play because you're playing 3 different types of them to utilize Noctowl, yet again, just like we talked about, to find all of these pieces of the puzzle in this deck. And especially with Crispin, right? As we talked about earlier with Dragapult Godango being a great one to find different energies and attach them. It's even better in Terra Box to be able to fit your wacky energies of Pikachu EX, or maybe find the different energies of either Clefairy, Wellspring Ogerpon, Teal Mask Ogerpon, right? To be able to accelerate your game plan depending on the matchup.
I will say, I'm looking at this list, Jake, and look, I might be wrong, but I think it's criminal that there's not one Terra Orb in this deck.
Oh
I'm
yeah,
like,
yeah.
look, don't get me wrong, 4 Ultra Balls, if you have an Ultra Ball, you can technically get whatever you want, but sometimes you need to keep the other cards in your hand, and, you know, one
I
Terra
think
Orb. What could it hurt? What?
I
Who?
think the
Come
biggest
on.
thing is I think the biggest thing is why you're not running Terra Orb in something like Charizard, because a lot of all your Terra Pokemon are basic Pokemon, so just running 4 Nest Ball
That's true.
is really, really good,
That's fair.
in the list. Whereas Charizard, right, you need
It's an
more outs to the
evolution.
Charizard.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an evolution, it can't just be Ultra Ball
You know
that
what?
you utilize to be able to get that guy.
Valid, Jake. Valid.
Yeah, I think that's mainly the reasoning. You do play one of my favorite cards in the format right now, Ditto, with
Yeah,
the
transformative
transformative
start.
start if it's in the active. If you don't know what Ditto does, because it's not been popular, I will admit, but really cool in kind of counter box style decks. If it's in the active spot at the beginning of the game, right, during your first turn, you can search your deck, choose a basic Pokemon, and switch it with that Ditto, discarding the Ditto. So, really, really cool to make sure that you've got like another out to what is the most efficient attacker or card that you need Pokemon wise, basic Pokemon for the
Yeah.
matchup, or could just be like a little hoot hoot.
I mean, as long as you can find Latias on your
Yeah.
bench, then you can usually get into that Ditto pretty quick and be like, hey, I really need the Fan Rotom, or I really want, I need a Terra Pokemon, so I'll go grab one of those. So, and because it's Buddy Buddy Poffinable, in theory, you can grab that plus Fan Rotom, that plus Badu, who knows? Lots of things.
Yeah, I
But
mean, there's plenty of options to find it with Nest Balls, Buddy Buddy Poffins, Ultra Balls, right in the deck. It's going to be really interesting to see. I think this is also kind of like a difficult deck to play as well,
mhm.
similar to like the Feraligatr. So you're going to have to put in some time.
Yeah, I think because your Noctowls are wildly important and understanding your matchups. This
Yes.
is like any box style deck.
Any
Um,
counter box. Yeah.
right, like it is entirely matchup dependent, and you really have to understand like what am I going to probably play against, and what is my line, right? Like who do I need? What Pokemon do I need to target down? Yeah, so definitely very fun because you're playing all basics except for Noctowl, which it's kind of
Mhm.
not that hard to find. But yeah, like largely a basics deck, which is also I think a really fun deck type to play. But yeah, so but Jake, that I think we're gonna call it there. That's a lot of different decks and a lot of different
There's a
news.
lot of them. Yeah.
Yeah. But we'll try to cover some other more weird archetypes in the coming weeks. And then also just generally talk about post rotation stuff. But
Mhm.
any other things that you want to say to folks before we sign
I
off?
I will in the show notes or the description. Justin Basil has an excellent website that lays out a lot of cool decks in the upcoming format because, yeah, new decks from Journey Together and other decks worth considering after rotation. So, plenty of stuff if you're looking for a starting list. I'm going to be checking out this Mamoswine list because
Yeah.
I need to really decide if I want to commit my time to Mamoswine or Enzorark because I love. Ah, man, I love Mamoswine. But anyways, I'll leave those in the show notes and the descriptions. And I think that's it for the podcast this week.
Yeah, I will say your local game store, if they held pre-releases, they are allowed to sell their booster boxes starting the day before this podcast comes out. So if you're
Yeah,
listening
Monday.
and you're thinking, "Oh, I have to wait till Friday," your LGS was allowed to sell them already, so swing on
I
by. Hopefully it's
will,
not too late. But yeah.
yeah, and I will say as well, I'm seeing the pre-release prices. Like today is March 23rd,
Pour
right?
one
So
out, Jake.
the day before the stores can start selling the pre-releases. The market price right now for a Journey Together booster box is $274 USD. It's not worth it.
I
Absolutely not worth it. Do not buy, especially if you can spend money without caring, then go for it. I'm not
Jake,
going to
I'm
stop
gonna
you,
tell
but
you right now. I'm gonna brag a little bit. I was able to lock in a case of Journey
ooh,
Together for
can you
120
leak the
bucks.
price? Oh, 120 a box?
Totally, like, to me, it's actually technically below MSRP on a per pack
Mhm.
basis, but to me that's probably what people should eventually get used to, is like that's your baseline at your LGS. You're not going to see $80 or $90 boxes ever again.
Oh,
But
yeah, we haven't seen
120
that in years.
but 120 I think is like, assuming that your LGS was able to get allocation from distributors at a real wholesale price,
Mhm.
you know, that's
I have
that's
a
the
question
dream.
for you, though.
Yeah.
I have a question for you. When did you make this pre-order?
Uh, I mean, I I can't give away too much, but let's just say I didn't do an official pre-order. I know people
Oh,
at
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well,
LGS's
when did you, like, decide on, like, that price specifically? What? Because
6
like,
weeks, 4 to
here's
6 weeks
because
ago,
like
maybe.
oh, really? That's
Yeah.
kinda surprising. Because like, I mean, especially if you look from, like, January, the pre-orders for a
Oh yeah.
booster box have gone from 190 USD to 275, basically, and
Yeah.
that's a lot of times, like, I've done it once or twice where, like, I make a pre-order for a box without seeing anything in the set, just
Mhm.
because I have a really good feeling that the price of that is going to go up, so I wanna slam in a price. So I was wondering if you, like,
Yeah.
pre-ordered that case basically, like,
6
6
months
months ago
ago?
or something
No.
like that.
I
Because I think I pre-ordered my Journey Together box. I'm just getting 1 box.
Yeah.
I think I pre-ordered it in, like, November or something.
It's a tough one. None of the stores around me do pre-orders of anything that far out just because it's
Mhm.
impossible to know allocation. Like they're like, I can't guarantee anybody anything until I know what I'm getting. And you usually don't know your allocations until like I think 8 to 10 weeks out, something like that.
Yeah.
So, but this is me again saying your local game store is going to be your best friend long term in this hobby. And so getting to know the people that run it and being regular as a player, like it doesn't guarantee you anything, but what it does in my mind is allows you to like have that open line of dialogue. And store owners and managers can and do all the time make like exceptions. I'm going to put that big air quotes. It's not really exceptions, but like the good ones, will prioritize people who they know are regulars, right? Like they're not going to necessarily sell you their whole allocation. That's crazy. But like they'll have a limit. Sometimes it's 2 boxes, sometimes it's more if they have a better allocation. But they'll say, here's my limit, here's that price. If you're happy, you can pay well in advance and then you can get that. So I know that not every store does that or has that policy and or can have that policy, but like, you know, but that I will say that stores like that, they require you. There is a level of loyalty required of like when the Pokemon hobby is not on fire, you still got to go to the store. You still got to buy a box from them, even if the Amazon price might be less. I think that's like the rapport you eventually need to build is like, you know, so my 2 cents.
It's one of those things, and just make sure to be financially responsible.
Yes.
Anyways, that's gonna be the Metapod podcast, the Pokemon trading card game podcast that revolves around the evolving meta. I almost screwed that up entirely. Not sure why, but anyways, we'll be back next week for you, and we'll talk about some other cool things that have been going on in the days. Anyways, I'm Jake. That's Sean. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you later.